Hey guys, turkey season is in full swing right now, and if you are planning on getting after it, make sure to pick up some Meat Eater Phelps turkey calls to stuff into the old turkey vest or into your fanny pack right now. I carry a few different things. I like to use mouth calls, and I like to use pot calls. Mouth calls or diaphragms, I like them because it gives you hand-free calling, meaning when you're working a bird up close, you can have your gun on your knee, finger on the trigger, ready to roll, and still be making turkey sounds. I like pot calls because I just like pot calls. I enjoy calling with a pot call. Whatever direction you go, including a box call, which I don't personally use too much, but they're fun and great, and I started out with them. Yanni, on the other hand, one of my main turkey hunting buddies, he loves box calls. And what's funny is I'll now and then look to him and give him the look that means get out your box call and find us a turkey. So it's not that I don't like him. I just have Yanni use his. Then I don't have to carry it. Go to Phelps Game Calls. Get calls that are made in the USA and get calls that'll get them close. Find yours at phelpsgamecalls.com today.
Hey, I'm Downtown Tyler.
And I am KC Masterpiece. And you're listening to
The Element Podcast. So we were just talking about how KC is quick on his feet. And I'm not, because I say and then I can't think of what I'm saying, and then I say quick on his feet. So, but we were talking about how he could have been a good comedian if he had a different little compass of sorts. And so you mentioned something about Bob Smiley, who I didn't really know. I know Tim, who's that guy? Hawkins.
Oh, Tim Hawkins, yeah. Yeah, same kind of guy, like clean Christian humor
or whatever.
Yeah.
It's like it only goes so far, and it's kind of like the issue is nowadays they don't even call it like clean humor, they call it dad jokes.
Yeah.
So if you don't cuss in a joke, like it's a dad joke. Like It doesn't matter what you're talking about hardly. It's like if you like, I don't think there's anything between. It's just like our society, right? It's super radical, right? Like you either are like just going crazy and have no fear of saying anything, or you're telling dad jokes.
That's right.
Like, how come there can't be a middle ground there? You know what I mean?
I don't know. We do our best. Most of y'all don't get to hear the middle ground.
Yeah. Well,
usually because it's at the expense of another. Usually is why.
Yeah, it wouldn't be. It's only of
funny, each other is probably better.
It's
not
only funny
people.
between us when we're like, well, I don't know. I know your heart better than most guys that probably listen to this thing. So you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Anyway, so it's a beater out there. The Whitetail Weatherman is going to give you the report right now, and it's I don't think it made it to what it was supposed to today.
I don't think so either. I think the heat showers kind of toned it down a little bit.
Yeah, it's we got a little afternoon clouds and that kind of thing that built up, and it wasn't quite as hot, which was good, and it was also windy. So I kind of I did all this what they call TSI. And I'm a new landowner, so I don't know a whole lot about this, and I'm not acting like a pro, but I did all that yesterday when I thought we were going to go jump up another 7 degrees, and it didn't jump up 7 degrees, and there was wind, and so I'm like, man, I probably just sweated that out a little too hard.
Why did you get all fired up about the TSI?
Well, because of our guest that we have today, Mr. Adam Keith from Land and Legacy. He came out to East Texas and hung out with you and I on property all day. We saw 2 pretty small pieces of property, and it took us like 8 hours to do it because we just sat and talked. We would walk 10 yards and talk for 15 minutes.
Yep. And because sometimes it's just standing in the shade is a good thing.
Yeah, that's true.
And we ate Mexican food twice that day.
Oh, we did.
Yeah. The Texas treatment. Yeah. If y'all come down and see us, that's what's happening.
Yeah.
In all defense, I just made old man noise.
I love it.
We did try to eat Greek and get real cultured.
Yeah.
But
we have a really good Greek place.
We
here.
do. How about that?
What is the deal? Emory has good food, dude.
No, man. No, it doesn't. No, y'all don't come here.
Yeah,
Nobody
y'all go
move here. Yeah.
Don't move here for sure. We don't need any deer hunters moving here.
That's right.
We need some
because there's only 7 deer. No, it's actually not true. We talked about that a lot with Adam. Actually, our deer density is pretty high nowadays, which is a new development in the last 15 years or so.
Yeah.
We've talked about that quite a bit on the podcast, but we're both going to be taking some steps on our properties to kind of maximize our potential for deer and overall wildlife. And you kind of were the first one to do some action.
Yeah, I borrowed your chainsaw, so if it wasn't for you, I wouldn't have done it.
Perfect. Well, it's just because I lost your other one.
I don't think so.
No, we were there when it got lost. I don't know what happened to that one.
We're pretty sure it got stolen at a Mexican food restaurant, actually.
Is that what happened?
Pretty sure El Mana, it was stolen from that parking lot.
Oh, no.
That's where I've always assumed it was stolen from, so out of the back of my truck. Anyway, I was doing some clearing. Yeah, I was clearing cedars, and there's a bunch of them in there, man. And, man, I feel like you have this hesitancy for a good reason when it comes to, like, cutting timber, because you can't just grow it back real quick. You know what I mean?
Mm-mm.
But with cedars, like, we all three would probably agree that there needs to be some thinning of the cedars in there, right?
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, like, it just, I'm also a little bit worried, you know, and I think we talked to Adam about this in this podcast, but like about like what kind of shade you're going to lose and also cover, you know. And I think with a big cedar, a lot of times, especially if they're crammed together, there's not a lot of low level cover anyway on them. So I'm good with chopping them down, but I went in there and chopped for a while. I don't know, maybe an hour and a half the other day, just cutting cedars down in an area. And you get to thinking, and you're like, man, these things are just falling wherever they want because I can't make them go certain ways because there's a big elm tree on the other side of them or whatever. And it's like, you kind of wonder, like, am I cutting off an entire, like, access to this open field by doing this?
Hold up, I'm going to scare this cat. Nah, he didn't do much. Oh, well. Man.
That's a big old
he's not. He sprayed that thing. That's nasty.
Ooh, dude, that's the worst smell.
Oh, gross.
Anyway, so, you know, I'm just, like, worried, am I, like, cutting off a big part of the like field entrance here, you know, by just felling this timber in all different directions, you know, like, and I'm trying to pay attention to keep like some kind of a trail through there, I guess, you know.
Yeah.
And then also like even taking cedars out, I'm not gaining a ton of sunlight in that area. I'm going to have to drop some elms in there, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And that gets even more scary because they're huge, you know, and it's like, and then also something that I really wanted to ask him, and I'll probably ask him in private sometime, is about how, like, our deer, if I create good summer habitat, so shade, but also good forbs and stuff growing up in there, you know, stuff that we're going to browse in the summer, and I've got bucks on my property in August and September, are they going to still be there in November? You know what I mean? Like, we've seen on public in Texas where they aren't really there a lot of times. Like, they disappear about the first or second week of September, and then we're like, what in the world? And we see them a couple more times on trail camera throughout November, but like they definitely don't home range there, you know? So that's some stuff that I kind of like am worried about. And so I kind of like got in there and cut a bunch, and I look back and it was like this little sea of destruction of cedars, you know, and I'm like, okay, maybe I should just chill for a second, take a look at it here in a few weeks, see what I think.
It'll look better whenever all that those needles die off those cedar trees and stuff starts growing in there. It's going to look a whole lot better. It's going to make a big difference to you.
I hope so, man.
I think that, like, I'm too short-sighted when it comes to the idea of felling cedars because I'm the same way as you. I'm like, man, you're taking away visual barriers, da-da-da-da. But within, like, 6 months, you got something cool, you know?
Yeah.
And one of the cool
Hopefully,
things...
but because it is kind of late in the summer for that kind of stuff, you know what I mean?
Yeah, man,
Isn't
kind
it?
of.
I mean, you're still going to get some growing season, but like stuff's going to burn, man, here soon.
Yeah, but that cedar itself is going to provide nutrients and moisture to the ground because it's going to keep like the heavy sunshine off the ground, but it's still there's going to be light getting down there. So I think you'll be surprised. But the good thing about land management is like, yeah, you only have so many years in your life, but you know, you still got some time. One of the good things about Adam, and one of the things I appreciate him for, is that he's not like hard-nosed about stuff. Like he understands, he doesn't agree always with like your own personal desires on your land, but like he understands that I'm just probably never going to cut down a mature oak tree. And he's cool with that. You know, he's like, well, let's just work with that. We didn't talk about that a ton, but we've talked about it in the past. Like, it just hurts me to cut down a big mature oak tree. I just ain't going to do it, you know, and for better or for worse, that tree grew there and in my opinion, it deserves some respect. It's getting real hippie, but we like that. But you know what I'm saying?
Oh,
Like,
yeah.
he's real chill about this stuff, man. But
My dad is not. My dad will straight up, if any tree that's just somewhat not desirable, he's like, get rid of it.
oh yeah,
I'm the same. I'm a little more towards you. Like, man, that's a huge oak. You know that big red oak that I had by my shop?
the split one.
Yeah. That one, like, everybody that I talked to suggested I take it out because it was going to probably die once the pad got up and everything, and it didn't die. You know, at
Not
least
yet.
not in the first 2 years after putting the pad up. You know, so
And that ain't your concern now.
it's definitely not now. But man, it was a beautiful tree. You know, it's just hard to cut. But
Yeah.
you know, I did cut. This is one thing I want to talk to you about because you know a little bit more about this stuff than I do. But I right on the edge when I kind of where I went in, and I can show you where this is later on, but it's kind of in my corner there. I've found some big persimmons, and I think you and I and Adam probably looked at them at one point. There's like 4 of them that are loaded, and 2 of them are this big and this big around.
That's
I mean,
cool.
they're huge, dude. They're,
Yeah.
you know, 25 foot tall or whatever. And so they're loaded with persimmons. And so what I did was I cut, you know, there was a couple of trees that were kind of blocking sunlight from them. And
Cut the
stuff, you know?
understory and everything.
Yeah, cut the understory
Nice.
so that deer could graze the persimmons once they fall underneath too. I cleared the cedars because the deer's not going to just stick its head into a cedar, you know,
Oh,
unless
no. Yeah.
unless there's something really good down there. You know, I'm just trying to maximize, like, say 250 persimmons fall out of that tree in the fall. I want the deer to be able to get to 250 of them as opposed to, you know, 125 or whatever.
Yeah.
So I cleared everything out. I gave it some more sunshine. I actually cut one of the male persimmons down as well. That was kind of there competing, and kind of made this like little area, like a hangout area for them maybe. But
A killing spot.
that's kind of what I'm thinking, you know. But I definitely can't kill them from the tree that you know about on the fence line there. But anyway, there are like little bitty green persimmons all over the ground there.
Oh, drop fruit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Why is that?
Probably stress or definitely stress of some sort, like either irregular watering or just drying out. It's just the natural process of things.
But it's not going to lose them all, probably.
Probably not, unless we have a terrible drought the rest of the summer, which right now the 10-day forecast shows no rain.
I know.
But one of the interesting things about 10-day forecasts that, I mean, it's something to kind of just take into consideration for all kinds of stuff, is that at least some of the time it doesn't take into account Gulf systems.
I know.
Like Gulf systems, for some reason, they don't include those in the 10-day. Like, because I can remember, like, when Ike was coming through, which is a little while ago, but other storms, like, were coming, and they wouldn't show them at all.
Yeah.
And there's, like, a hurricane coming through East Texas, and it's not on the forecast. It's very strange.
I know, dude. It barely sprinkled at the house for probably 30 seconds earlier, and it was like a 3% chance of rain.
Yeah.
At that time, I was like, and then I looked on the radar, and I'm like, "There's nothing on the radar." But it's clearly there's a storm right there.
Oh, there's thunder right here earlier.
Yeah, it's like, what in the world? Like, I mean, I guess it just gets so hot and it pops up so quick that everybody's just like, okay, we're not even going to report this thing, you know?
Yeah, I
but
don't know.
anyway, I just wanted to kind of ask you about the persimmon thing because I was kind of like, man, why are all these like halfway developed persimmons just falling off?
Yeah,
you know?
fruit drop's the thing that a lot of trees do, man. Any fruit tree, and honestly, it's kind of one of those natural processes that trees are liable to overproduce. Like, no tree or very few trees can actually sustain the amount of fruit that they flower for. So, like, that tree knows how much nutrients and stuff it can handle. And you see some years where everything goes perfect, and then persimmon trees are breaking and stuff because the persimmons are so loaded on there. I mean, of course, persimmon trees aren't made to break over because they're so loaded with fruit. So it's not the normal way of things, at least.
I got you.
Yeah.
Well, one cool thing that happened that we didn't talk about with Adam on the podcast was while he was here was we basically stepped on a fawn on your property.
Well, we didn't injure it or anything, but
Yeah.
I think that all 4 of us may have stepped over that. That might have been between
I definitely
our
didn't
legs.
step on it.
Yeah, yeah.
Because I would have noticed it, you know. But somehow I don't know if it was like beside a dead decaying log or something, but we all like stepped over it. Except Jack said he stepped on it, but I'm not sure if he meant that he actually did step on it because it got up and ran off fine, you know, whatever.
I told you this later, and I don't know if it's just deja vu or what, but after that happened, I almost feel like I saw it in my self-conscious. You know, like, Did I? I don't know. But, like, I felt like we were so – well, I was trying to point out a black cherry tree, and I was, like, real concentrated on that. And, like, looking back, it's like I can remember there being a fawn, but I think it just might be, the mind playing tricks on your stuff. But either way, that was cool.
Yeah.
And we saw a doe on your – like, we saw deer on both of our places that day. That's cool.
That was cool, man.
Yeah.
I had never actually stumbled upon a fawn like that.
Not that young.
So
Not me. Yeah.
That was pretty cool, man. That was really cool.
Yeah.
When we didn't get any video of it, nothing on like Jack had the video, the camera, and I had the cell phone, and neither one of us were able to get the video.
Fast little boogers.
He was, man. He kind of like he hung around for a second, but we were just like so in shock that we just didn't move very quickly on it. But,
and then we kind of deducted that may or may not be blackneck's fawn, because remember Adam was like that fawn had like a really dark face and stuff, and I was like, I know a 3-year-old buck that has a dark face and a dark neck. So that'd be cool.
Black neck.
Yeah.
It's like a pirate name, man.
It is, dude.
Old black neck.
Black neck beard. He's a teenager pirate.
You got a neck beard.
That's right.
Oh, I got a neck beard. I need to trim it up. Anyway, that's all I got for you today, man. Really, that's all I've been thinking about is kind of the property management type stuff because it's been heavy on my plate lately. And
well, y'all are fixing to leave on a little vacation, so guys, wish Tyler and his family safety and go have some fun. We have podcasts prepared for the whole thing, so do not despair.
Somewhat. And we're gonna have a new series popping up. What? This next week?
Probably next Tuesday.
Yeah, next Tuesday.
If everything goes as planned, and I don't see why it wouldn't, because whenever you leave town, it's like, all right, I can concentrate, which isn't true at all. But I just like to say that.
Can we go ahead and talk about what it is?
Yeah. So last year we did a backcountry elk hunt, and we very well may do that again this year. I don't know, but last year was like our first big intro into that. So we really keyed in on the backcountry stuff. This year we're going to do more of an elk series. So it's not an elk 101 or anything like that, or it's not going to be concentrated on elk calling. Well, we will talk about that, but everything it takes for you to go kill an elk and to feel like that you will have a chance of success at that. We're going to interview guests from all across the spectrum, from the big names to some of the no names. Or I don't want to. No name is not the best way of putting it. So guys that you haven't heard of as much. Ooh,
indie.
That's right.
Indie guys.
Yeah. Like the guys that would be playing like at a below street level bar in Austin, but elk wise. Those guys.
Yeah, they know what they're doing as well as anybody, but they're just not as high profile.
Sometimes better.
Sometimes better.
Yeah.
But we've already interviewed a couple guys, and both of them were awesome, especially some of the tactics we've gotten on that indie level that I think are going to be something that you don't hear on every other podcast that talks about elk hunting. So pretty exciting. We're going to try to get about 10 weeks of that going on this summer so that you can get prepared, get your mind right for elk season. And we actually have had several people talk about how they're going elk hunting this year, first time in a long time or first time ever. And
that's right, man.
It's exciting. Hopefully they'll be able to glean some information and get a lot of help from it. So anyway, with that said, let's go into this podcast here with Adam.
Hey, y'all, real quick, before we get to the interview with Adam, I wanted to tell you about how we were using our onX mobile app whenever we were out with Land and Legacy doing these property evaluations. Of course, we're walking around talking about natives versus non-natives and different habitat features and types and the things we can do to improve our properties for whitetail, ground nesting birds, even insects. All of wildlife is important to make this thing go. So what we were doing is we had our mobile apps out a ton, of course, navigating our property boundaries because there's really not a lot of fences, but also we were using them to denote like where different habitat features were. I mean, even down to the specific trees that we thought we needed to take out. Or you can even use the area shapes like out in the pasture where you're trying to figure out how much seed you need to get to create a really good visual barrier along the road. You just take that thing, stretch it out, and it tells you how many acres that you have, and then you can use that to figure out how much poundage of seed you're going to need. Either way, we used onX the whole day when we were out there. I know you know us as the guys who are out chasing deer around on public land, finding new spots to hunt and using our app all the time that way, but it's just as effective and just as important and just as useful for land management as well. So now let's get to the interview with Adam.
All right, so now on the phone we've got Adam Keith from Land and Legacy. Flying solo tonight, man. It's just you and me, right?
That's right. That's right. We kicked Casey off pre-show for a little trash talk. I feel like Michael Jordan. I read I don't know if you guys watched the Last Dance documentary, but I saw so many memes. But I saw where when he was with the Wizards, he actually one of his teammates trash talked him in practice, and the next day the guy was traded. So here we are, and came on the show, and we're kicking Casey right off.
That's all right. I'm gonna go eat. See y'all later.
Man, so
yeah, it's good to be back, guys. I guess this is my third time on your show.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, congratulations, man.
That's what happens when you kill big deer, man.
Yeah.
You get on the show a bunch.
Well, I've been on twice for not big deer, so
Yeah, you're
I'll try
tenured.
to do my best to I could have came on and talked about an epic fail of a miss this past fall.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, I didn't wrap my hands around any mature deer.
We don't tend to highlight guys that fail all the time.
Except for ourselves.
Yeah, we have to do something with ourselves.
If you ever figure out a way to highlight that, the content is endless.
Hey,
Yeah.
there's one of the big players out there does that quite often, has made quite the career off of rumbling and stumbling into a deer every once in a while. So you know what I'm talking about. But no, dude, you
Here's the top secret. A lot of them have.
yeah, no lie. With Adam's help, nonetheless, right? So, but we'll leave it at that, I guess. I think people who are cultured say I digress at that moment. But,
Yeah.
did you
And you're cultured.
just so y'all know.
Because we just talked about badminton.
yeah, I'm as cultured as cottage cheese. So, anyways, dude, you funny enough, we're on the phone now. You're in the home state of Missouri, but you were in Texas the other day, hanging out with us.
I was.
Yeah.
I was. And you try to make a slight joke there, and we can go into saying Missouri is called misery. But I can assure you, after being a few days removed from Texas, back here in Missouri, I would have to say that I'm enjoying my time in Missouri much better than my time in Texas.
Yeah.
Well, is
I'm
it because
looking-
of family or because of temperature or both?
There's a lot of reasons, but I'll just say right now I'm sitting on my back porch looking at the sunset, and it's a nice breeze, feels great. But I'm in shorts and I'm looking down at least 30 chigger bites from the knee down.
Ooh.
Oh,
And I
man.
have chigger bites all the way up to above my belly button.
Oh,
And so I got loaded with chigger bites the day after I left you guys.
yeah.
And then the next day I got in the truck and it said 98. And I was like, get me home, get me home.
That's right. You hit Indian Nation, ran 90 to get up there out of that
That's
heat.
right.
Yeah, if you're going 90 on Indian Nation, your teeth are falling out. Is what's happening. Dude, so it's supposed to be 101 here tomorrow, but we had a cold front, and it was 94 today, I believe. I did see 95 in my truck. And I actually did some timber stand improvement, which
Snap.
yeah.
Wait, no.
Am I getting too far in this?
Isn't it forest stand because it's not timber?
Well,
didn't you make that designation or something
yeah.
like that?
Yeah, and I won't coin that phrase. I believe, I don't know who coined that phrase. I know Dr. Craig Harper uses it a lot, and he brought up one of our late night discussions at Whitetail Weekend in March. I was like, valid point. I'll start using that terminology.
It's not
You're
it's
just
not as
trying to
cool.
improve, and I'll say it in the best Craig Harper voice I can, but you're trying to improve the forest. You're not growing timber, you're growing forest. So
Just light a
here we
match.
are, forest stand improvement for you because you don't have, and sorry, a little bit of background noise. I'm not sure if you guys can hear that.
Oh,
or
yeah.
not,
It's not any louder than the robin that's going crazy back there. So
well, that's just part of it. That's the best ambient sound you can have, right? Birds chirping.
Oh,
yeah,
yeah,
I
man.
know you got that. Surely that's on like your wife's iPhone playing in the
What it
background.
sounds like is, I know, well, y'all's daughter's a little older, but we have a swing, baby swing, and it's got little sounds on it, and it sounds just like that. So I think he's just got that playing off of his baby
That's
swing.
funny.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't even hear it. I don't even hear the noise. It's just probably because I sit out here a lot when I'm on the phone. But
Yeah.
Texas was great, but man, that heat is something else.
Dude,
Yeah.
it gets. I'll tell you what, man. I was so, which I didn't cut that long, because I couldn't go any longer. I was so sweaty that the bottom of my pants were sloshing like I had jumped in the lake, man. It was.
Oh man,
I hadn't been like that in years. I actually put a towel in my truck this evening to come over to KC's because my seat was still soaked. So it was pretty pretty brutal, man. We've got a lot of humidity right now and all of that. So you put me up to quite a task, but I tried to do a little bit of Eastern red cedar cutting today, which I know is something that makes you smile.
Puts a twinkle in his eye right there.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, and I don't know how much you want to get into the habitat stuff, but that's just something that for you guys, and you know, when I was down there, we're looking at the property, both your properties, and just like talking Eastern red cedar, because it is such a, it almost seems like in the Whitetail world, kind of a all-American team member, or it's so amazing. But man, when you really look at the health of the land, even on your farm, in the timber, you're still fighting Eastern red cedar, and most people don't even discuss it because it's not really even thought of, and it's certainly not looked in that landscape health lens.
Yeah. So, what do you think about after, like, what is your kind of overall thoughts about after you came and looked at our properties?
Yeah, so, you know, when it comes down to it, I think this is something that so many people can relate to. And this is why I encourage people to not picture yourself. Don't run your race. Don't look in the other lane and say, well, so-and-so, he's got 1,000 acres. He's going to kill more deer than I am. But it's really, I've said this a lot to clients, because we do a lot of consulting. Matt actually consulted for a guy today. I think it was 17 acres. And so we work with smaller parcels, and a lot of times it's like a home and 20 acres. And so they live on the place, and they're going to hunt there a lot, but it's not their everyday hunt. But they always kind of overlook it because they're like, well, it's small. Well, yeah, it might be small, and we all know that a deer's home range is bigger than the acreage of the farm, but who cares? Let's stop making excuses. Let's make this piece of ground, whatever the acreage is that God has blessed me to manage and look after, I'm going to make it, doggone it, the best piece of ground that I have the ability to manage.
Yeah.
And so if you have smaller acreage, you get to go down and manage feet. You get to manage square yards. Wow. Bigger landowners, a lot of stuff goes by the wayside because they just can't do it all.
Right.
But when you're on smaller acreage, you can really look at it and say, I'm going to maximize every acre, every square foot of this place has meaning, has purpose, and is going to provide benefit.
I just came up with a slogan for you guys, I have to say.
Let's hear it.
It's small, who cares? I think that's perfect for y'all, right?
I'm not
for
sure
you and
that's
Matt.
going to work.
that works perfect for y'all.
There's a few T-shirt ideas thrown around there, and a lot of them get thrown out. But I think if somebody, it's like we almost need to have a separate brand that we have no ties to where people are just like, have you heard about that? Have you seen those shirts? They're brilliant. Yeah. And none of it can fall back on us.
Yeah, we've discussed the exact same thing, dude.
And one of them that I'd love to do is a T-shirt with a common ragweed leaf that says "Weed Farmer" or "I love weed." Meaning ragweed, because it is so wonderful for wildlife. But I don't think that one's going to fly for us. So you won't be seeing that anytime soon. So.
Well, you just let the public know, so you're going to see it on somebody else's platform soon.
By all means, go for it. I'll buy it from them. But whenever you're looking at your guys' farm, in comparison to the surrounding neighborhood, why can't you, even though it's, we're looking at 25 acres, 28 acres, give or take, why can't it be the best 25 acres or the best 28 acres in the neighborhood? There's no reason it can't. And so when you look at deer during October, November, December, pressure's on, what do? They find the best secure cover they can find that still provides forage to where they can make a living in the shadows, basically, in the areas that they can survive. So if you're hunting your place, very cautiously, not over-pressuring, not going kamikaze and just blowing deer out and hunting like you would public ground or like you're never going to be there again and getting real aggressive, you have the ability to do some habitat enhancement, provide something that's lacking throughout much of the neighborhood, and hunt it successfully to where deer feel more comfortable during daylight hours on your farm. And it's as simple as that. When you look at a pressured deer, especially a mature buck, if he's in a very mature or a very pressured area, what does he do? He shrinks down, he moves at night, and he moves very, very little during daylight. And where he does move during daylight is where he feels most comfortable. So that's usually not acres and acres and acres. That's usually very small units.
Sure.
So if you can provide that right there on your farm, there's no reason why you have to pay taxes on 1,000 acres to kill a mature deer.
Yeah.
So what was like the limiting factor, you think, of like a general East Texas farm down here? Like, what's the thing that you got to think about?
So I think you don't see a lot of hunting shows headed to Texas unless they're going way down to Silver Corn Feeders or Senderos.
They're going to Tejas,
which is all great.
whenever they're going to
Mexico.
A lot of people aren't going to Lake Fork area to hunt big deer.
No.
And it's just like conversation you and we had while I was there. Is nobody has worse poaching problems than me. That's what everybody thinks. Nobody has worse deer hunting than me. And for you guys, when you look at South Texas or even just Texas, and just draw a line across the country, from like the northern border of Oklahoma, and draw that straight east across the country, and then go south of that. The biggest stress period of that deer herd is summer heat. You go above, northern Missouri and draw a line, go straight east, it's going to be late winter, because you guys really have 6 months of heat. Half the year is hot, if not more. And then you go up north and half the year is cold. And then you throw the other 3 seasons in the rest of the 6 months. And here in Missouri, we have 2 weeks of spring, 2 weeks of fall, and we have winter and summer. And so it's like you guys have to manage for heat. And so how can you maximize your farm in the heat? You have to rely on plants that are adapted to heat, that still continue to produce quality forage. You have to rely on plant communities, shrubs, to provide cover that's also thermal cover. Thermal cover is a very hot word that whitetail people throw out there, and typically we think of evergreens, keeping the snow off of them. But in your part of the world, thermal cover doesn't have to be evergreens. And quite frankly, I hope it's not, because evergreen down where you're at is the native one, the eastern red cedar. And you think about this. I use this analogy. Sorry, it's not the first time I ever said it, so it's going to be the second time I say it, and I'm going to say it on your podcast.
Okay.
When you guys go to the beach, what do you do? I'm asking you a question. You guys answer it. What do you do?
Go to the beach? Is that what you said?
Yeah, if you're going to the beach to hang out with your family, what is one of the crucial things you take? That if you forget, your wife's going to tell you about it.
Oh, sunscreen for sure. Yeah.
Sunscreen. What else? Are you going to just go out and flop down and sit there in the sun?
Nah.
Umbrella.
Yeah.
What's the purpose of an umbrella?
Shade.
Yep.
Shade. But what else happens? The breeze blows right under it, right?
Yeah, you don't go get in a tent. It's also
you
shade.
You don't go get in a tent. That's crazy. That's madness.
Yeah.
So you wouldn't go out and pitch a 4-wall canvas wall tent, would you? Because you cut the wind off. Even though you're in the shade, it's still hot. So we got to take that same mindset and bring it to the landscape. So we're looking for umbrella-type plants. And that's where shrubs, especially sumac, come in. Little bitty pencil stem, not many leaves underneath or limbs underneath. It basically has a ton of foliage on top, and the breeze can blow right through it. And so a deer can get in sumac groves during the summer months, and the breeze blows through it, but they're still in the shade. And then flip that, and woody browse isn't incredibly important in the South. We're going to lean more on herbaceous cover, so we're looking for flowering plants like giant ragweed, common ragweed, pokeweed, greenbrier, all these things to provide a ton of forage. And then during the 2-week window when it is cold in Texas, you have the ability for woody browse on the sumac. So that shrub is providing multiple benefits. One really crucial one, and then one that can help take the pressure off the food plot. Because in reality, guys, food plots didn't come on the scene till when? to me, I think somewhere in the mid to late 80s. Really got hot in the 90s and early 2000s. And my goodness, I think now you can't call yourself a deer hunter unless you plant a food plot, right?
Yeah.
And deer were making a living long time before that ever happened, before food plots were ever brought into the picture. So here you are, we got to change our mind, change our perspective of the fact that if you don't plant a food plot, your deer are going to starve. That's not true. But if you let invasives and other non-natives take over, yeah, they're probably going to go somewhere else. And so if we really try to maximize our acreage, and you look at each plant, that if it's a forage plant, a herbaceous plant in Texas, each one of those plants has a different growth period or different maturing rate. And so if you take a long list of plants and you look at each individual plant, and you say, okay, this one is highly productive, highly nutritious, highly selected from this week to this week. Okay, during that time frame, you try to have as much of that plant scattered across the landscape as possible, where then the next window of time you have another plant. And if you space that over the course of 12 months, you have year-round forage. And if you're selecting native plants, a lot of those double as forage and cover. And so if you look around your farm, look around your neighborhood, it doesn't matter if you're in Texas, Missouri, Iowa, or Minnesota. If you look around your neighboring farms, there's a chance that if you start to learn non-native and native species, you're going to see a whole lot of non-native. And all those non-natives, typically the ones that are laid out across the landscape in great numbers, aren't great cover and aren't great forage. And so if you basically start, in very simple terms, labeling non-natives red and natives green, you start looking at your landscape, chances are you're going to see a whole lot of red. It's shocking how little natives there are.
Yeah.
And so, man, you asked a question, a simple question, and I gave you a long answer.
That's so atypical of you too. So I didn't really expect that. Well, okay, so you're talking natives and non-natives, and that's really an interesting thing. I love to look at that, and that's one of the things that, like in the past year, especially being a landowner, kind of my eyes have been open to. What was kind of the prevalent non-native that you saw as problematic around our area?
I think one of the big ones that, sorry, you're hearing me step, not a whole lot of background noise now because I'm stepping inside because it started to rain.
Hot dog.
But, for your area, I think a lot of guys would know that coastal Bermuda is a big one.
Yeah.
You're going to see a lot of coastal Bermuda if you go anywhere where it used to be cattle farm. And, Tyler, your place was grazed. So you've got a decent mat of coastal Bermuda. Then you also have some scattered bahia, both non-native warm season grasses. And those right there, I think it's amazing. You really don't know how much of a grip they can put on your farm until they're not there, if that makes sense. Yeah. Because for my area, fescue is the big one. And so it may not seem like a big deal, but as soon as you remove it, you're like, where did all these plants come from? Well, they were just laying under there trying to catch your breath or trying to make a living, and the fescue had it by a death grip. And so for your area, I'd say coastal Bermuda and seeing, if we just look at your open landscape, Tyler, I'd say coastal Bermuda and bahia, and then sedges. A lot of those were native sedges. But due to the amount of grazing that was occurring, the cattle weren't really eating the sedges. And so they were basically, it'd be a lot like gardening, where you go out and you pull the weeds to try to promote the crop that you're wanting, whether it be tomatoes or peppers. You're removing the competition. Well, cattle were grazing the competition for the sedges. So they were just getting year-round growth. Right. And no competition. So that's kind of a thing that will likely change just with rest. So I'm not real worried about it. But I am worried about the coastal Bermuda and bahia grass spreading, because non-natives have no native predator. And so when we talked about milkweed, I've talked with you guys outside of podcasting. Believe it or not, listeners, we actually have a conversation outside of the podcast.
How
Right,
about
fellas?
that? We're like real world friends or something, man.
Yeah. And so, when you look at milkweed, some years you're like, man, I got a lot of milkweed. Next year you're like, man, I'll have to drive around and find some milkweed. It's just not overabundant. Well, they have natural native predators. Typically the main one that I see is aphids, and you'll see these growing, blooming milkweeds, and you'll see them loaded up with bugs, and those bugs are sitting there just all over it. And if you'll track those milkweed plants, when the seed pod starts growing and you're like, man, it's going to have a lot of seed, and all of a sudden aphids show up, and you start seeing the plant stressed, and you'll notice that those seed pods aren't nearly as big as you thought they were going to be. Well, that year the aphids won, but next year there may not be as many aphids, and the milkweed wins, and there's a lot more milkweed. That's what happens with native species with native predators. That's the way nature works. But when you have introduced plants that don't have predators, oh man, they just get to go crazy. Yeah. And unfortunately, that's one of the big things that we as land managers, deer hunters need to start talking about more and stop promoting these non-natives. Now, inside of food plots, that's fine, because most of those that we all plant have never shown any signs of being invasive. And never is a strong word, so I should probably say most of the time they don't show any signs of being and invasive. So in your open areas, you've got coastal Bermuda, Bahia, and then in your timbered areas, what is it? You've got a lot of eastern red cedar.
Yeah. I was going to say Japanese honeysuckle too. I got quite a bit of that. Yeah.
Yep, for sure. And then you look over at Casey's farm, and he's got kind of an interesting, I really liked it. Kind of an old field component. I'm not just saying that. And by the way, before I forget, this is crucial for Casey. You remember when we got my truck, and I said, "Man, that bird left a mess on my windshield." Yeah. And I turned the wipers on. You're like, I think you made it worse. That wasn't bird poop. That was pine sap.
I kind of wondered if that was pine sap. Yeah, that's real tough to get off.
I drove around Texas with just smears all over the windshield, and finally got home, took a razor out there and scraped it off. And I was like, never again will I park under a loblolly when it's draining sap.
Yeah, well, at least it smelled good. So, better than bird poop.
Yeah. So here's a question I have. So you're talking about, we talked about the forest stand improvement that I was doing today, and that basically what you're promoting with that forest stand improvement, or one of the things you're promoting is allowing sunlight to hit the ground. It's a pretty basic concept that a lot of people have talked about and heard, and so we're trying to create herbaceous growth that comes up due to that sunlight hitting the earth, and maybe the disturbance you make dragging trees around or whatever. But so. For when I think about this, though, this is the one thing that kind of is confusing to me, is that, you're basically, when you take those cedars out and you allow herbaceous growth to start to happen, and that process happens, and then you've got like stuff growing up pretty thick inside the woods there, you're going to cut off some airflow, I feel like, if you're not growing sumac and things that grow similar to that, maybe plums or something like that. So, how does that affect deer? And then also, you want to leave some shade in some areas, right? And I know you had mentioned maybe a couple of bedding areas that I would maybe create through some of the forest stand improvement and that kind of thing. So maybe talk about how all that works together and why it's good and what could be the problem in the woods there with the forest stand improvement.
Casey, you and I have a lot of similarities. One of the biggest similarities is the fact that we have a vast amount of ADHD. And so Tyler just asked me a multi-layered question, so you're going to have to keep me on track.
I will do my best.
Me sitting outside earlier was bad, because there's like, oh, there's bird. What am I talking about again? Okay, I need to keep going with this thought. That's a great question, Tyler. And it is definitely going back to that beach analogy. A canvas wall tent was like comparing to the thick cedars, where one of the great things that makes cedar awesome in winter is the fact that if it is a cold north wind, they can block that wind. Well, in the summer, they're doing the same thing. And so basically we're trying to promote crop tree. I kind of talked with you about crop tree release. So we're trying to ID the trees that are the healthiest, that already have their crowns above all the surrounding trees to where they already have a jump start on them. So we're going to try to release those. And by doing that, if you guys have ever been in like a savanna or a woodland type landscape, you're going to know that the wind blows through those areas more than a dense forest of closed canopy, regardless of what the species composition is. Mm-hmm. And even though you have sunlight penetrating through that forest now because we're opening up that canopy, it's not that we're completely opening it up. I think anybody who's spent much time hunting whitetails and observing beds and travel patterns know that some of their idealistic bedding areas aren't monster half-acre tracts. It could be a simple plum thicket out in the prairie. So if we have a mix of quality woody structure, typically what we're looking for is that woody structure that provides great side cover that also has the ability to get in shade or get in the sun, depending on what time of year it is. So if you cut in a bedding thicket, and Tyler, on your place, we're talking half acre to 3/4 of an acre, or even down to a 1/4 acre in one of them, is you have the ability to where if a deer's bedding there during the fall, because that's what we're searching for, we're trying to really maximize your hunting potential during the October, November, December, is we're trying to find and create bedding that is great, even if it's hot, cold, whatever time of the year during that fall, whatever kind of warm front, cold front we get, we're trying to look and provide great cover. And that's going to come because of the woody structure. When the pressure starts hitting, they try to get in those dense thickets. So that's going to happen by cutting cedars. And really, there's not a whole lot of things that are better than a cedar laying on the ground because of the amount of cover they provide. But when you look at later in the summer, so going back to that kind of, we'll try to wheel it back, try to circle back. But when you're going into that the summer bedding, with those bedding thickets and opening up the canopy to where there's more growth, it's going to depend on the site specifically, and it could range from each 10 foot, it's going to change. But in your part, it's a kind of a lowland site where it's a little bit cooler already because it's just got more moisture in the soil. It's not out baking in the sun. So that's one big benefit regardless of the plants growing in the understory. And the other one is some of those spots, even if it's opened up almost full sun or semi sun, where it catches a good part of sun part of the day and it's shade the rest of the day, is the plants that are going to grow may only be sedges to where they're only a foot tall or 2 foot tall. So the breeze will still blow through there. Mm-hmm. And so that's really not a huge concern of mine by doing that cutting. So
you're trying to create edges within that timber, or are you just going in? I mean, because you could go in, you saw it, man, there's cedars throughout, and there's a few places they're thicker than others, but like if I went in and cleared every cedar, which I kind of got the sense that you thought that would be not a bad idea. If I went in and cleared every cedar, I mean, there's still going to be some edges in there, right? And then you start taking some elms out here and there, and you're creating edges so that there is shade essentially on edges of the big, open areas, I guess, so that deer can use that shade but still catch some wind and that kind of thing in there, I guess.
Yeah, and I should say, since I have talked so much native, non-native, and before you guys get the email and have to forward it to me about me talking so bad about eastern red cedar and somebody has to bring it up that they're native species, I will say it before they get that email to you, is eastern red cedar is a native species. And so you can't necessarily say a native species is good or bad. In my opinion, you can't line them out and say this one's bad and this one's good because that's my opinion. And it's like saying that my opinion is more valuable than what God put on this earth in that certain region. And so for me is just because there's a native species that appears to be bad is not, we have to change our perspective. We probably just don't understand it, or we don't understand its role on the landscape. And so Eastern red cedar, one of the reasons why I talk so poorly of it a lot is because of its aggressive nature. It's not invasive, it's just aggressive. And it's because we've lost our natural disturbances, and that being number one, prescribed fire on the landscape. And so if you listen to pre-settlement journals, some of our first explorers, you won't hear them talk about Eastern red cedar very much at all. You won't hear them talk about juniper very much at all. You'll hear them talk about a lot of grasses, a lot of wildflowers, a lot of prairies, a lot of barrens, a lot of savannas and woodlands. You won't hear them talk a lot about closed canopy forests unless we're talking riparian area. And that's because fire was a huge part of the landscape. Well, anybody who's spent much time around fire and Eastern red cedar know that that's not a good combo unless you're pyro, and then that's a great combo.
Oh, yes. That's me.
It's good. It's fun.
And so Eastern red cedar, although it's very aggressive, I can't come out and say that it's terrible because it isn't native, and God put it on this earth for a reason.
Yeah. Well, there's a couple interesting things what you're saying there. For one, like the three of us are Christian guys. We've talked about this extensively, and I appreciate the brotherhood, by the way. But everything is a creation of God, right? So to label at least wildlife or whatever you want to say, nature in any way bad, kind of really is a strange concept. I thought about this a lot with wild hogs because they're a non-native, invasive, this and that, but it's still a living being. And
sure.
Yeah. And I've kind of come full circle on this because I did hog eradication for a living. It was my job for a while.
Yeah.
But you have to, like, when you start taking the creation out of things, it's kind of sacrilegious or heresy at some point in time, which is kind of a weird thing. The other point that you're making was, like, what really is a native? We talked about this for a while underneath shade tree the other day. Like, just because Eastern red cedar is a native, well, the name says Eastern. So, you start talking about some of the western reaches of where it's encroaching into, like, Nebraska and some of that stuff. It's like, well, yes, it's from the North American continent, but is it really doing a good job where it's at in the landscape? And that's a completely different matter.
Oh, man, you just uncorked a huge can of worms right here. Here's the rest of the podcast, guys. This is where we're going.
Worms.
Worms are not native either, right? So there's that.
In places. No, there certainly are native worms. But I think a lot of times when you go up and people talk about how wonderful worms are for soil health, it's like, they're not native in that region. So we need to look somewhere else. And so, that's a man. Here we go. So I'll try to stay on track.
Let's do it.
Whenever we talk native and non-native, and we talk so much about, native landscapes. And so when Matt and I talk about it on our podcast, and every person and every night when we try to talk to our wives about it and they roll their eyes.
I feel you.
Yeah.
Yeah. When you just try to talk, it's kind of like those memes where you see that you go to a get together and you're like, who's the guy that I can talk about native plants to? Okay, there he is. I always shoot for what's actually achievable. And so that to me is that pre-settlement time frame when the first European explorers were getting here and what they were describing, because we have the journals, we have documents that kind of tell us what that landscape was. I don't think we have enough information to say, let's go back to bleak time, whatever that time frame is, and let's put camels or whatever back on that landscape, saber-toothed tigers. We can't do that. But what we can do is look to the same plant communities that were here 200, 300, 400 years ago. And that's what's achievable, in my opinion, because there's a lot of places, and even not too far from you guys. Oklahoma is one of those states that I love because it's not very far removed. The Flint Hills of Kansas isn't that far. The Lusk Hills of West Iowa isn't that far removed. And so that's what I try to shoot for, something that's actually achievable. But when we look at non-natives coming on the landscape and we say, well, why does it matter? And it goes back to that natural predators. A lot of these that are invasive or labeled invasive don't have those natural predators like I mentioned earlier. And so therefore they get really aggressive and we lose diversity. And basic ecology tells us diversity is king, and diversity supports more life than monocultures. It's not really that hard to understand when you really simplify it and you go, this plant's for this insect, that plant's for those insects, this plant is for that insect, this small thing eats that insect and those insects, and you just look at a much bigger food web or food chain when you look at a more diverse landscape. And so that's really kind of going in that direction. But then when you kind of go back to Eastern Red Cedar, we say, well, what's native? Well, I can tell you what's native, not necessarily plant, tree, but more disturbance. We know fire was very native. Mm-hmm. It was used not only by Native Americans, but naturally it was occurring on the landscape. Well, Eastern Red Cedar doesn't get along with that landscape, so it finds places to colonize that doesn't get burned, cliffs, bluffs, areas where you just can't get a fire there because it's all rock. Mm-hmm. And then you look at grazing. And so the grazing is another native disturbance. And those two right there can shape the entire landscape. And so if you look at preservation, conservation, well, you guys really got me going. I'm going to have a hard time going to sleep tonight. I'm all wound up. And so when you look at preservation, it's just like basically putting a dome over a landscape and say, I want to preserve this. Well, I can tell you what happens in preservation if I can take you to lots of wilderness areas where preservation has caused us to just have monocultures and non-natives.
Yes.
Now, there are some great wilderness out there, mm-hmm. but in my experience, I do not like the preservation mindset. Oh, I wish I could.
Yeah.
Man, I really wish I could go back 1500s and say, whoa, hold up. Before you plant that or you plant that, let's just enjoy what's here. Mm-hmm. But now you go to conservation. We're trying to do the wise use of our natural resources, and we're trying to promote what God gave us for this region.
Yeah. And
we're trying to use God's natural disturbances and replicate that.
Yeah, sure.
And doggone it, if you stop looking at deer and antlers and you just look at God's creation all the way down to flowers, it's a whole lot more fun year round, and it's a whole lot less depressing. Mm-hmm. Because if we make the bar for quality outdoor time of a deer on our wall, most of us would be very depressed individuals. Mm-hmm. KC especially.
And, I don't even have a wall, much less a deer.
And so to me, it's like when you really get into natives and you really get into natural landscapes, there's not a time that you can't go out and just enjoy yourself and enjoy the process and then enjoy the result. And I'll share a quick story. This spring, I was fortunate enough to harvest a turkey on, I don't even remember what day it was, but I shot a turkey, and I shot it with my brother, and Matt was filming, and we had a good time and high fives, and that was all great. And the next day, my brother was hunting, and we were dealing with some turkeys, but it was more about just, we were back on the home turf, my family farm, and the long-term lease I've had right next to it. And, talking, and we were just enjoying seeing our work. And we're like, man, we got to find those lady slippers, which is in the orchid family. And we were walking along, and we finally found some yellow lady slippers. We hadn't seen it blooming since 2004, I think. Yeah, 2004. And when we found that plant, we high-fived and got more excited than the turkey the day before. And I think in that moment, I realized that hunting and being outside had changed drastically for me. That was just this spring, because now I'm getting into a view, or I wear a different lens than I used to. I'm looking at the world differently. I'm not looking at it as a God put me on this earth to reign over all the critters or all the animals and all the plants. and to strike it down with fire and lightning bolts. But he more put me in the middle of it and said, overlook it, be a caretaker. And it's not that I'm any more powerful. It's just that I have a soul and I have a mind to help me understand the way it works and the way God made it work. So I get to be right there in the middle of it.
That's one of man's first jobs, too. I mean, Adam had to name the critters, and then his job after that was to practice husbandry. It wasn't to just go out and just dominate everything, right? And I think that's right. That kind of comes full circle to what you do, and what we should be doing as land managers, like especially with the eastern red cedar and stuff like that. Just because it's native and it's good doesn't mean that there's not a place for humans to control it and manipulate it to make the landscape the best that it can be, right? Like the whole preservationist mindset is like
lazy, isn't it?
Yeah, it's kind of lazy. Yeah, that's a good point. It's like, we're just going to let this do its thing. Well, humans are a part of nature just as much as anything else, a part of creation just as much as anything else. So our influence on the landscape matters just like a buffalo or a monarch or whatever it might be. You know, it's all a part of what is happening outside.
Well, you know what happens with preservation? God comes in and does it for us.
Yeah.
And it's oftentimes catastrophic.
Yeah.
Take a look out west where timber harvesting is not looked upon in a happy light. Mm-hmm. And so forests grow very dense. Mm-hmm. They get very stressed, and you have insects killing them off, or disease killing them, or in the worst circumstances, you have catastrophic wildfires. Mm-hmm. And in my opinion, those catastrophic fires are a result of us not doing our job of managing the land.
Yeah, 100%. Fire suppression in the West is the worst thing that happened to many things out there. I mean, you can point, like mule deer are having a real tough time, right? Well, everybody's trying to figure out the little reasons why. Well, guys, it's because it doesn't burn off anymore. What do you think they eat? You know?
Yeah.
They don't eat big old spruce trees.
Yeah, they do not. They like those young plants.
Yeah.
And so what happens, though, after those catastrophic fires? Because the news media, I think maybe in my 40s, I'll start a business that owns a media news company. And instead of going to these places when the fires are raging, I'm going to go after they're burned. And I'm going to showcase what happens once the fire is ran through and say, you know, fortunately, no lives were taken during this wildfire. And so now that we've cleared that up, look at how awesome this is.
I think they call that PBS, and nobody watches it.
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
That's still a thing?
It's you know, I don't know, man. This is something that I think you and I and KC all get really excited about. We love this whole thing that we're talking about right here. But it's, you know, I asked you this question the other day. What I loved about the three of us hanging out the other day, and Jack was involved too, but, you know, he was more of a listener. What I loved about it, especially with you two, because you guys both are smart as a whip, and y'all, I just loved how we would like challenge each other with the questions all day. And so, you know, like I remember specifically several times, but like one time you said something like, how many species of crawdads are there in the world? And I was like, at first I was like, so is he asking that like he doesn't know, or does he know? And so KC goes, do you know how many chromosomes they have, or something like that? You know, but it was like y'all are posing these questions as like almost like as if you didn't know, but it was really just a challenge to the other guy, and it was like this really like discreet way of doing it all. But what I asked you at one point when we were on KC's property is like along the lines of what I'm going to kind of talk about here, and maybe you have a different way to pitch this to me as well today as you did the other day.
KC didn't like the way I said it in the field.
Yeah. So, you know, like I said, we care about this thing, but it's kind of nerd status a little bit. So how do you make people care about this? Because people do like animals and people do like nature, but people also like air conditioning and all the comforts of the first world of America.
Yeah,
here,
and they don't like it when the deer eat the roses and stuff like
yeah,
that.
exactly.
You know?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think, boy, you put a lot of pressure. Didn't like the way I said it in the field, so I'll try to stir something up.
I'm just wondering if there's if you have any other
I'll
different
just
angles,
base it off
too.
of the way I go about conducting myself, and trying, because there was a time in my life where I really liked the people that were like me to be around me, and those are the people I had conversations with. And now I find myself trying to have conversations about what I do or what I enjoy with people who may not necessarily be a hunter or may not necessarily have the same political mindset as me or conservation preservation mindset. And frankly, I've given presentations. One of my favorite presentations that I gave was at like an outdoor event, and I don't think there was a person in my group that came. There was like 20 people. I don't think there was anybody under the age of 70 there. And they were very much naturalist, preservationist, flower-loving, bee-loving, bird-loving people. And here I am with this accent trying to play the part that we were on the same side. Mm-hmm. And I think by the end of it, we were having a great conversation because it was more just open, formal conversation. But what we have to do as hunters, we have to really look at our image. And I think too many times our image is redneck, deer in the back, beer in the cooler, driving around, shooting stuff. And I think a lot of that is because of what we do on social media. But I think a lot of it is that's what we talk about. And so when we're coming into why should somebody care about what we're doing, is we have to show them what. First off, I love the phrase that people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. Mm-hmm. And I think in most of my conversations, hopefully, that people can almost more push me away because they're sick of hearing me talk about how much I care about it. And so you have to key on, or what I key in on, is what that person really cares about. So like my father loves cattle, but he also loves quail. So I have to key in on everything we do, or a lot of what we do is promoting quail. And I don't have to drown him out with all the other garbage that he doesn't care about. All I have to do is say, hey, we're growing quail numbers. And there's a lot of people, even though they sunburns and mosquitoes and ticks in the outdoors, I don't care. Well, there's something they care about, and it might be just life in general. And that if we don't manage our landscape and we let things just fall by the wayside, the quality of our landscape can be a direct comparison to the quality of life that we have in that landscape. And so if we don't care about water quality, then how long can we continue forward as a society? Probably not very long. So maybe they don't care anything about the outdoors, but they probably care about their kids and their grandkids, and the idea that their grandkids can have just the same life that they had. Well, I hate to break it to them, but if you just let nature do its thing, or we just let everything go out the wayside and we continue to plow or continue to do this or we continue to do that, we're all great societies and cultures have failed because they lost their land. So like you look at Rome and you look at all these other ancient cities, what happened to them? Wasn't that somebody came in and wiped them off the face of the earth? It's because they farmed their place to nothing. Mm-hmm. And they ran out of food or they ran out of water. And to me, if we're trying to get people to care, we can't go to it at the mindset of going, hey, should we work together? I'd like to kill big deer too. Maybe we go into it and say, hey, let's build our landscape up and make it more diverse and more environmentally friendly. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. I think out of the three of us, I probably struggle with that the most. Like, not struggle with it, but like it's hard for me sometimes to let go of like the whole deer aspect for mm-hmm. the rest of the property to be. There's no doubt that I want it to be a wildlife sanctuary, but spending a lot of money on a piece of property, I'd like to, and one of my favorite things to do is hunt deer. So I would like to, and it's going to be a byproduct of a healthy property, right? You're going to have better deer.
Absolutely.
But I still am in this like learning process of learning more and more every day to appreciate nature and native things and the different aspects of all of that, so.
Yeah. Well, here's one thing I should say. Now that I'm on somebody else's podcast, I don't have to worry about offending people listening to us.
Yeah, shoot holes in our boat.
Well, they're just going to shoot me, and you guys are fine. They'll say, "Well, I hope they never have that guy on."
Good.
I did a podcast. Matt and I did one back some months ago, and it's called "I Only Care About Big Deer." I think I offended a good part of people, but I think I brought some truth, and I stomped some toes because, if our goal is big deer, quality of hunting, we can do that and never think a second about the quality of the landscape. We can go in and we can put food plots, and we can go and hinge cut a few little areas,
10-foot fences, all that.
We can put up fences and make sure our soybeans or make sure our corn doesn't get destroyed before the season. And then we can also put out mineral, and we can put out fruit trees, and we can do all these things. We can put out little water holes or little water tubs, and do all those. Sure. And we can probably still have really good deer hunting. But at what cost? Because seed, fertilizer, time, diesel, all that stuff takes money. And then the fruit tree takes time, it takes money, it takes fertilizer. And then the water hole might hold water, or we have to continue to fill it up every month or every couple of weeks. It takes time, a lot of it. And then we could look at the mineral and say, well, no scientific evidence has ever proven that makes deer bigger. What scientific evidence has shown us is that there's a pretty good job at congregating deer. And in this world of CWD, that's the last thing I really want to do. Mm-hmm. And we do all these things. And so my analogy would be, I went and practiced golf with Tiger Woods, and, he shocked me. Instead of hitting on the driving range and putting on the putting green and chipping, we went over and we were trying to hit a 7-iron off a cart path the whole time. Well, how often do you take a 7-iron and have to hit off a cart path? Not very often. And yet we do these things. We spend most of our time prepping the whitetail world for things that really don't make a huge impact. Does that make sense to you guys?
Yeah. No, 100%.
But it's the stuff that drives the industry because it makes people money.
That's right. And I hate to say it, but sometimes I look back and I was a sponge to the outdoor industry during the 90s and early 2000s. If they said it, I was trying to do it if I could afford it. Mm-hmm. Most of the time I couldn't, but I was planting food plots and doing all that stuff. And it's like, now I look back and I'm like, son of a gun, I could have just started cutting trees, make a healthier forest, or burning it. Mm-hmm. And I would have been much better off, because that is managing the land. When you look at the fraction of the landscape that you're doing with a food plot or mineral site or tree, and I do all those minus the mineral. I do the food plots. I do some of the trees. I try to go more into the native ones that don't require pruning every year and are really susceptible to disease. But at the same time, if I live in the country one day, I'm probably going to have fruit trees too. So it's not completely negative, but if you're doing them in a lot of your food plots, yikes, that takes a lot of time. Mm-hmm. And so when I look at like your farm, okay, well, how do we manage that in a big scale? How do we manage with neaning and manage acres with one practice? Prescribed fire is wonderful. Even dormant season disking to promote early successional plant communities is great. Managing the forest, going in and doing some forest stand improvement or timber stand improvement, all those things are managing you're managing a large scale. You're managing, it may be only an acre of a young forest, but you're providing almost year-round benefit for those deer. and you have to do it really one time. You may have to return years later to cut those trees or those stump sprouts back down. But you spend one Saturday cutting that in, and you can go back 10 years and see that work. But if you plant a food plot and come back 2 years and never touch it, it may never look like you planted anything.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Makes sense, man. I have a question that's burning a hole in my pocket here.
Let's hear it.
How do you feel about tomatoes?
That's the thing, because it's just like, I had a guy call me one time. He's called me a couple times, actually. He works in the landscaping business, and he's like, Adam, you need to figure out a way to make the food plot industry have hostas. And I almost hung up on him. I was like, are you kidding me? That's what you're calling me about, telling me to plant hostas? Do you have any idea how expensive that'd be? That's going in the direction that I'm wanting the industry to circle back and come the other direction, a 180 off of that. But yeah, let's find a way to make food plots even more expensive and more overbrowsed. When it comes to tomatoes and a lot of those like non-natives, let's just say non-natives of things that we're trying to do, I have no problem with food plots. Almost, I'd say 95% of those species that we plant in food plots are non-native, but they've also been here for a long time, and they're adopted as not being invasive or aggressive. So I have no problem with them.
Yeah.
And if I live on a farm one day, I'm totally going to have a garden too.
Yeah.
But are you going to see me take that whole field of yours and start planting tomato rows? Well, no way.
That'd be expensive too. But yeah.
It'd be expensive, and you'd have to have a crew of people out there doing it.
Man, I love tomatoes so much. It's like, got to be my favorite non-native.
I got to share a story with you guys. You don't know this.
Okay.
First time I met you guys at QDMA National Convention in probably 17, you guys had some awesome salsa. And we had it in your hotel room. I was like, man, that's good. And you guys sent some salsa with me and Matt. And I was so pumped. I'm like, man, I can't wait for my wife to try this. This is good. We don't get that kind of salsa up here in Missouri very often. I got in the airport, and I had to throw that away because I wouldn't let me slide with it.
Oh,
Yeah.
man.
I thought, man, I'm not going to tell those guys that I had to just trash it. But, man, I was so upset about that.
You didn't chug it?
I almost just rented a car.
Yeah. Dude, we meant to give you some the other day and totally forgot now that you mention it.
Yeah.
We had talked about giving you some. We had a little bit still left from that batch, man. So, I don't know if it's that batch, but last year's batch.
I made it last year, too. Yeah. So.
Yeah.
And, so that's an interesting point. Now I'm going to spin off of that, because how many times it goes back to that analogy of being within the element or within, there you go. I'll plug your guys' show.
Thanks, man.
Within the landscape. You're not reigning over it, but you're a part of it. And so many times we try to, I try not to bash too many groups of people, because I love farmers and I love everything they do in providing food. But at the same time, how many times do you see an entire farm get tilled under?
Yeah.
And they devote 100% of their farm for one or two things. And it's like cattle farmers. I grew up cattle farmer. My grandpa was a cattle farmer. I'm sure down the line I had cattle farmers. And it's like, I own this farm. It's 100% cattle. Well, when you go 100% in something that's not native or can be pretty constructive, you lower the productiveness of all the other things on that farm. But you can still have cattle and still have great deer, still have great game birds, still have a great diverse landscape. But you can't go, if you go into 100% for cattle, you're going to make the others drop from 75 down to 25.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you have tomatoes, that's great, but don't try to go 100% tomatoes.
Right.
And I think too many times you see people that are like, what they end up doing is they end up fighting themselves or chasing their own tail, because it's like, I have to add all these soil amendments, and I have to do all this different stuff, and then I don't have hunting available because I'm all in on this. And you can really have your cake and eat it too.
Yeah. I mean, I worked on many properties, one in particular, doing, feral hog and coyote control. It's like 7,500 acres of soybean and rice fields. And for 1/3 of the year, it had monocultures on it. And for 2/3 of the year, it was a vast desert of dirt, and maybe there was some bloodweeds or something that I don't even think is a native that would grow up out there. And you're like, man, alive. Like, I know, like you're saying, they're providing food, but man, there's a more responsible way of doing it in some way, some shape, some fashion. I'm not the expert to know what that is, but I think if you just think about those extreme examples and then kind of apply that to what you have on your own personal property, you can make the world a better place.
Absolutely. It's just like cattle farming. Like if you run your cows and you graze it down to the lip high, and then you move the cows, well, you're not providing any cover, any forage available for the wildlife. So then you've devoted those acres to cattle. But if you graze a third, trample a third, and leave a third standing of the vegetation that's in that pasture or paddock, you're still providing great cover. You're still providing forage for wildlife. And in a lot of the research, Kyle Hedges, Frank Longcarriage that consult with us that are really masters of upland birds, they encourage grazing, but they do it they call it conservation grazing, where now you still have acres for cows, but you replicate nature and the historical bison herds to where, when they go through, they graze and they trample, but they don't beat it into the dirt, and then they move on and give that time, that acre or that paddock plenty of time to recover. And, what they find and what they've found is that quail are doing much better in acres that are grazed in a kind of a rotational grazing system compared to your traditional quail management where you have to do strips of milo and strips of hedgerows and bare dirt disc and then some native grasses. Which isn't achievable. You couldn't run cattle on that landscape. And so they're finding a way to replicate nature, which is just like it took us all the way to 2016 to figure that out.
Yeah. It's well, that's the thing, man, is money gets in the way, money blinds basically all that research and everything that you would possibly be able to do. People are as woke as ever right now. So, now we're having opportunities to try out different things, I think, because of that whole movement. Or
failures result in either a new job or thinking harder.
Yeah.
And that's what this coronavirus has been a horrible deal for our country, but it's going to be interesting to see how much ingenuity comes out of it, what kind of new things are released. And I think we'll see a lot of companies realize that, doggone it, our employees are pretty productive from home.
Yeah.
And hopefully we'll see a lot of children who get to be around their parents a lot more. And we have a society that's got parents that are more involved.
Yeah.
And that may be something awesome that comes out of this.
Yeah, absolutely, man.
That's a great point.
And one thing that's really kind of keying in on me and what we're doing is when you look at resources, whatever you have is a resource. So if you have cows, you have a resource. But if you own land, you have a resource. And resources oftentimes result in money. And somebody wants to pay you for that resource. And so if you have cows, you're going to raise, let's just say you're raising calves, and then you're going to sell those off. You're making money. Well, if you have wildlife, that's a resource, correct? And so if you have used your cattle to replicate nature to where you're not completely abusing your farm to where you have more wildlife, let's say you actually have quail, now you have the ability to sell a lease to somebody who doesn't own land, but they want to have access. They'll pay more money most likely because you have deer, you've fenced the cows out of the woods, you've rotationally grazed to where you have the ability to, if they have a bird dog or friendly with a bird dog, they can hunt quail or they can chase rabbits, to where even though you lowered your cattle productiveness down figuratively to 75%, you've raised your wildlife value to 50 or 75% as well, to where you may make a little bit less on the cattle than you originally did, but you also are making a lot more money because you've replaced that and then added some because you're now leasing out your farm, because now you have a farm that people actually want to hunt.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's
And
a Texas model, man. There's so many leases in Texas where it's like there's cattle on it, and then they're also leasing the deer rights, and then somebody else has the spring turkey rights, and then somebody else has the bird rights, for this month or whatever.
And those deer hunters probably get mad because they're like, have to fence my feeders off from the cows.
Mm-hmm.
But if there's a guy who, like here in Missouri or the Midwest, you have lots of acres that are timbered, and the cows kind of can meander through. And it's like, if they would just fence off that timber and allow the wildlife to do their thing there, and then you just rotationally graze, where now you have guys that'll actually pay and continue to pay because they didn't pay 1 year and have the cows continue to mess up their hunts. They're like, I'm never coming back here again. Well, they're actually paying again and again and again. And man, I feel like so many. It's almost like we need to have a kumbaya meeting and get cattle farmers together with deer hunters and say, listen, we don't hate each other. We just don't understand each other.
Yeah.
I love it, dude. You're forming a new political
and the cattle
party.
farmer says, this is what I need. And the hunter said, this is what I need. And he's like, and they both say, well, I can do that. I can shut gates. I can keep the cows out of the woods. and there you go.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah. Well, dude, I'm glad you came to Texas, and I was really impressed with how much you knew about what we had going on down here, know, and it was pretty fun to walk around and kind of quiz each other and talk about stuff, and please don't do that to us whenever we come to Missouri because we're going to be so lost, but that's what's cool, and that's a testament to how much y'all do truly love the land, man. It's
yeah, man, I appreciate it. Yeah, I saw that on your Instagram story. You had Jack. I think Jack got me when you were quizzing me about dogbane, and so I kind of looked at it and was like, dogbane, right? It was like I said it with a question mark at the end. That dogbane. It looks slightly different than our dogbane, but it looks similar enough for me to say that. But I'm unsure.
Well, you're on the mark, man. Yeah. You got it done. We learned a lot from you, dude. Yeah. A couple things anecdotally, real quick. One kind of in jest, and one I kind of want you to touch on, and then we'll let you go because it's time to get with the fams. But you were not impressed by persimmon trees, which I was kind of surprised by because we're real proud of them. So just a native,
I'll
not a big
say
deal.
A quick thing. That I think if I were to base this off of if I was to base this idea off of just the conversations that I have with clients, and we've now worked in, I think, 28 states across the country. When we started Land Legacy in 2016, December of 2016, we've now been in 28 states and like 60,000 acres. And for some reason, the growing trend with landowners, clients of ours, is they want to point out their persimmon trees. I have no idea why, but it's like the miracle tree. And so when Matt and I, we laugh about it, like when we get our own farms, or it's like, well, when I'm planting a tree, I'm going to plant some persimmons. Well, man, there are so many more persimmon trees. Like we had one client who we would walk by persimmon trees in his forest for him to go point out one that's on the edge of the field. And it's like, we just walked by 50. I don't know why we're going to key in on this one persimmon tree. A lot of them didn't make fruit. It's like, now there are some that make great fruit and they're highly attractive, but you could plant some and find out they're male and you go, oh, shucks. Yeah. And so, persimmons are funny to me, but I love them. They're native. But
well, you owe me one because you ran it over. But
it's a non-native, so it's fine.
Oh, just kidding. The other one is a little bit more serious. I asked you on my property, would I hear a turkey gobble or a bobwhite whistle first, and you said a turkey gobble, and I was really astounded. And you said it's dark days for the bobwhite. I know that's a 2-hour podcast, but can you condense it into 2 minutes and just kind of what's the deal, man?
Oh, it's sad, man. It's hard to say. Actually, I'll make a shameless plug because I'm going to have Kyle Hedges come on. We actually have I have notes printed on my desk, and him and I are going to sit down, and it's going to be what happened to the quail. Mm-hmm. And it's kind of breaking down some of the majority the majority leaders in what has happened for declining in bobwhite quail.
Are you going to poll like all the rural farmers who all have different opinions for that too?
No. I have to say, we had Dr. James Earl Kinnemer from NWTF on our podcast, and he actually quoted those guys as being, they sit around the coffee shop pooling their ignorance.
Oh,
it's like one of those quotes that I keep. Yeah,
he was not afraid.
Golly, he was not afraid. Because in those coffee shops, you'll hear a lot of stuff like turkeys ate the quail, or
which you told us that. I'd never heard that before, so that's very. Since we don't have, well, I guess we're the ones that proved that wrong because we have neither. So, the turkeys ate the quail and then they choked on them. So. Oh man, this is I would love to talk about this in great detail, but let's just say, and I'll steal a phrase from Michael Chamberlain, University of Georgia, but death of 1,000 cuts. Yeah. He was saying it for turkeys, but we're going to say it for bobwhite quail here. Yeah. Habitat loss, urbanization, flooding, predators, lack of diversity. What about efficiency? Efficiency of farm equipment, is that another thing for bobwhites too?
Yeah, efficiency of farm equipment, overgrazing, lack of fire, lack of disturbance, quality disturbance. It can go on and on. But for example, that would be, go back to that question you asked me: why should somebody care about non-native or native? Quail, especially quail poults, they're when they hatch and they start moving around following their mama, they're eating insects. And insects are attracted to, they really key in on native species. So certain flowers attract certain insects. And in some circumstances, it's a very small window or a very small number that this plant only attracts a few insects. And those few insects are the only ones that know how to pollinate this species. And so we need diversity and disturbance, because a quail chick can't thermoregulate during the first few weeks of its life, meaning that if it gets covered in dew and it gets down to 40 degrees that night, it's going to die. It's going to freeze to death. And so if you don't have disturbance, particularly fire or grazing, to where you have short vegetation with clumpy umbrella type plants that are regrowing, or just cattle trails, or the matted down grass where the cows have been, to where a quail can move through freely and not be tangled up in grass that's covered in dew. That's what we're looking for. But at the same time, you need insects abundant to where they have forage available. Mm-hmm. And so the quail, you look every corner of the land and land use, and it's just like that. Look at cattle overgrazing. Most cattle operations are overgrazed. Mm-hmm. That's no good for quail. Look at urbanization. Well, that's not good for hardly anything other than deer. They can adapt to it, and foxes and coyotes. But none of those three are really supporting the quail. And then you look at crop farming, and it's chisel plowed, turned up dirt, no cover, monoculture, not attracting many insects, not really doing anything for the quail. And if you look at quail, you're going to find them anywhere in the country. The best places you can find quail are the areas that are the most, are the closest to a historical landscape pre-settlement than anywhere else in the country. Oklahoma, Texas, parts of Georgia, those are all just diverse landscapes. And you don't have that in most places. So that's what's happening to the quail. And unfortunately, they're not as easily adaptable as other animals. And so it's not just something that you can kick out on 20 acres that you fix, that you improve the landscape and say, here they are, because only 70% of that population dies every year. And it's left to that 30% to rebuild it. And so if you do that on 20 acres, that's not a very good return on your investment. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, it is scary. It's very scary. And I think that's one thing that I've said this on our podcast is, if you go to an area, let's say Texas, and you're like, how do I know the quality of the habitat is getting better? We don't gauge it on the size of the deer, because it would be hard to ever put the feather in your hat and say, I'm the best deer manager in the world or the best deer manager in the country. And I know there's guys who do that, but at the same time, you could do that and then turn around in the next fall, some guy who shoots a giant 250-inch deer, and he's never done a dang thing to his habitat. And he could say, well, I'm the top deer manager in the world. It's like, that's not a very good gauge because they're so adaptable. But if I had like my family farm, so I have the ability to I still have some quail, I still have turkeys, I've got deer, I got all kinds of other critters. But at the same time, do I gauge my habitat on the quality of deer? No. I gauge my habitat on the amount of animals, but specifically how well are the quail doing? Because they pretty much attach themselves to the phrase quality habitat, where you don't grow many quail in poor habitat. You can grow a lot of quail in phenomenal habitat. And so as long as I'm keeping a quail population growing, I know we're headed in the right direction. But if the quails start vanishing and I still have decent deer, I'm going, something's up.
Yeah.
And that's a fear of mine. And so, I said a turkey gobble because they're a little bit more adaptable. And I think just because there's more turkey hunters in the world than there are quail hunters, you're going to see there'll be more dollars put into turkey restoration. So East Texas will hopefully get turkeys.
They're working on it.
Man.
NWTF, they're in the state. They're working on turkeys here in East Texas. So I definitely think you made an accurate assumption there.
Hopefully so. So if someone wants to have an expert opinion about their land, or they want to do a deep dive into quail, or if they just want some legit hats, where should they go, man?
They can go to, I appreciate that. They can go to landandlegacy.tv, or they can go check us out on YouTube or Facebook or Instagram. And just search for Land, the and sign, and Legacy.
And we're going to be doing a YouTube video from those quote-unquote consultations that you gave us.
That's right, man.
They're more like quizzes, really.
It's going to really be a gag reel, but it's fine. No, and also, too, be sure and check out the Land and Legacy podcast on iTunes, because Matt and Adam, or Madam, as we like to call them, they do a great
dynamic duo.
That's it. Yeah. They do a great job,
We're like
man.
Jordan and Pippen, baby.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, that's cool, man. Well, brother, we
here's
appreciate.
Here's a funny one for you, real quick.
All right, let's hear it.
We were awarded the 2020 Owl Brothers Deer Manager of the Year, and they got up on the stage.
No, I'm kidding.
And here's the best part. Okay, so we've been called Twinkies and twins all the time, and the owner, or not the owner, but the founder of Cutie Mate, he got up there and he was talking about, these are the dynamic duo team from Missouri, blah blah blah. And they announce our name, and I'm outside on the phone, and Matt storms the stage by himself. And they're like, "Where's Adam?" He goes, "I guess we weren't that dynamic."
Man, just big time the QDMA right there.
Yeah.
Oh, that's funny, man. Well, dude, we appreciate your friendship, your brotherhood, and the opportunity to get to sit down and talk a little bit, man. And thanks for coming by Texas and visiting with us down here too. And we'll be sure and bring you some salsa when we come up and turkey hunt with you.
Absolutely. Sounds good, fellas. Welcome in Missouri anytime. Thanks for having me on.
Appreciate it.
Man, when I think about when I think like things have gotten difficult at times with some of the things that we do at the Element, and, we are always trying, I feel like what you and I try to do, we're both pretty creative people and enjoy that process. And so, a lot of times we're trying to find ways to do things that are different than what maybe some of these other people that are doing the deer hunting podcasting thing kind of, trying to figure out how can we do it different, because, everybody's doing it this way right now. So let's do it a little bit different, but still, help people out and that kind of thing. And I feel like that when that gets tough, or other things get tough with the Element, I can kind of lean back and look at some of these friendships I've made, like Adam and Matt, Kyle Bennett, John McWilliams, like some of these guys, man, that we've been so blessed to meet in the last couple of years, man. I know there's a lot more that I haven't named.
Yeah, don't feel bad if you're named to make the list, but we can only say so many names.
Three people basically came up on my radar, because one of them's Madam,
Yeah,
so,
that's right.
Anyway, so I just think, man, it's such a cool thing that I've gotten to experience because of this, and people that I've gotten to meet because of this that I wouldn't have met otherwise, more than likely. And these are people that really share passion of the same sorts with me, man, that I can appreciate big time, man. So
that's right, dude, for sure. And, you know, I'm going to go full Waddell on this thing.
Let's
like the brotherhood, man, it's cool, man.
Baby.
You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Like, that's a cool thing, dude. And I really love that when you share more than just the passion of hunting people. Like, it's really cool to connect on that level, but like, man, Matt and Adam and all the guys you just talked about, like, they're guys that we really share similar values with. And it just kind of, I'm not a big fan of self-affirmation. I feel like that is a path to the dark side, but it's not that, but it's something to do with like, it's nice to know that there are other people that you feel are out there trying to do good in this world.
Was Anakin doing a lot of self-affirmation?
He was, dude. Yeah, he was for sure.
That's why.
Yeah. Pain, suffering.
Yeah, it's good to know him. It's good to be able to chat with a guy, man, like that, and just he's so knowledgeable. I really appreciate Adam coming on. Y'all go check out Land and Legacy. Those guys do some really cool stuff, and are obviously have just more. We could have gone on this podcast for like 3 hours.
We talked for another 30 minutes after we got off,
at least,
and
man.
I told him we have to go.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah. we all knew it. We all knew we had to go. We just couldn't stop talking.
We got to say this. So after the podcast got off, and we'll have to have this talk one day. We might try to do some hunts with Adam or Matt and Adam. But we got to talk about heaven, and that was cool. Man.
Yeah.
Like that's a cool thing. And I think the great thing about Land and Legacy is those guys get it, and the fact that they know that we're caretakers of this earth, but one day this is all going to go away. Mm-hmm. And so with that perspective, what can we do while we're here?
Yeah.
You know, and that's a cool way of looking at stuff, man.
Yeah.
And come on, I'm fired up.
Well, don't get too fired up because you're sitting real close to a non-native over here.
Oh, man. Which one? Craig Myrtle?
Yeah. So, anyway, our elk hunting series, we mentioned at the beginning of this podcast. Don't forget about it. It's coming up early this next week. First episode. This first episode is probably going to be a lot of calling type stuff in it.
Yeah.
You'll see why. Pretty good caller that we're talking to, but things will continue to go through the summertime. Hopefully you'll be able to learn a lot. If you have anybody that you'd like to hear from, or any questions that you'd like us to ask some of these elk dudes, we are yet to interview probably 7 or 8 of them. So go ahead and send those to us on social media in the direct messages, or on the website at the email. That kind of thing. We've also sold a lot of shirts lately, so thank y'all. Thanks a bunch for that. It means a lot to us. We don't make a whole lot of money off of it because of shipping, and we keep the price of the shirt pretty low because we just want to spread the love. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
The shirts are nice and comfortable, and we appreciate just having that sense of support from you guys.
And guys, just so you know, not that there was complaints, but Modest Micah didn't want his muscles showing too much. So the larges are athletic fit.
They are, for sure.
And Micah's become a friend, but that dude, I wear a large, and I'm bigger than he is, you know, and it's just a personal thing, I guess, personal preference. So just be warned that they are going to be kind of that tight athletic fit. If you're more of a loose t-shirt kind of guy, maybe size up one or whatever.
Yeah, they're athletic fit, man. They're
and when I say
performance.
bigger, Mike, I ain't trying to like score on your shoulders or anything. Like, we're talking about that dad bod.
So just be thinking about that, man. If you're in the summertime, you know, some guys, man, are just lucky. They're not like a tweener size. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
They're either a medium or they're a large.
You know, I was a tweener, medium, and large guy for a while. Now I'm a tweener, large, extra large guy.
Yeah, I hear you on that, dude. I'm trying to keep away from that XL, man.
I haven't had to yet, but if I hadn't got back on the train, I was well on my way to that. Actually, probably was just real poor when it was time to buy extra larges, so I just spent my larges for a month or two.
Just let that bottom belly show.
That's right,
bit.
man.
Yeah,
that's right.
Good.
Ooh.
Well, Anyway, hey, also, if you're fired up about the elk hunting series, we have an elk hunting playlist on YouTube. You can go check out if you haven't seen all the elk hunting stuff that we've done, which is not a lot. We're whitetail dudes from what you consider the east, even though we're pretty much in the southwest.
There's a lot of elk that live east of us for whatever it's worth.
Yeah, it's true. But we do like to elk hunt a little bit, so especially you, and you're pretty good at it. So, anyway, there's some self-affirmation for you.
Thanks,
but,
brother.
Anyway, what else, Casey? Anything else?
Just looking at hummingbirds on non-natives, dude.
Yeah.
Have fun on your trip.
Thanks, dude.
Yeah.
I'm gonna try, man. It's a good haul to get out there. It kind of stinks because I'm like, I don't really want to drive 11, 12 hours right now. I'm just burnt out from all the gathering and getting ready we did today and everything else from the past week or so. But like we can't go somewhere else and camp and be comfortable at this point. Like you have to go to the Rockies pretty much,
or the Smokies, which is way further.
Yeah, but they're still hot this time of year too. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And the Smokies are further, so
yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like it's 16 hours to them, so you might as well go to.
I was like, man, what if we could just go down to the Llano or something like that?
I mean, I've done it plenty of times, but like with the family,
Bake City, Texas, dude. But anyway, I don't know.
And Snake City, Texas, which you like that even less.
Yes, yeah. So I'm gonna head to the Rockies and hopefully enjoy a few days. We're getting off the headed that way a little bit later than we normally or than we wanted to. We wanted to leave today, probably, ideally. But anyway, as soon as we get back, we are in whitetail mode because when I get back, you and I are flying out
places
and doing some more Map Scout challenge. So anyway, that's another point to be made. If you have a spot that you want us to Map Scout, if you know what the Map Scout challenge is, you remember it from a few months ago, send us the spot. The information is going to be public. But, if you'd like to see what it looks like and you can compare that to somewhere else on that big unit that you hunt or whatever.
Or go hunt the spot. Somebody's got to hunt it.
I guarantee you, we expect that people will hunt this spot. So if you want to go hunt it, man, that's fine. I mean, we're going to go do the legwork, show you what we see, and we're going to put it out there and probably not hunt it, but let you hunt it if
Let's
you
tell
want
the
to.
people where we're headed this time.
Okay.
Just the general area.
Sure.
That way, like, if we're headed to I guess the Kentucky, Tennessee, Illinois area.
Yeah.
Anywhere around like that kind of hub right there. If you got a spot, like we got a couple spots already that we know we need to go check out. But if you got a spot somewhere in there that you really want us to go to, let us know within the next couple weeks, and we'll make it happen.
Yeah, we're flying to Nashville and heading west.
Yeah.
So think about that and where you might want us to take a look at. Send us a map dot. Same deal. DM. On social media, or you can, however you can get in touch with us. You guys can figure it out. If you're listening to a podcast, you know what's up. So,
and with that, nobody do anything malicious. Like if you know where your buddy hunts, don't send us to his spot.
That's not cool, man. That's not cool. Especially if your buddy's got like a booner, because it's going to be on our trail camera, and then people are going to go rage that spot. So anyway, I'm sure we'll have a few people that actually get real mad about that.
Maybe a couple, but man, there's going to be a lot more that appreciate it, hopefully.
We're just trying to help people.
Listen, there's a chance that the Element guys let y'all know where the GPS coordinates of a booner.
There's a chance.
There's a chance. Maybe not a good one because booners aren't common, but like we're not going to hold any punches back. Like if it happens, we're going to let you know. So that's cool.
Now, you add a few inches and you talk about like a 200, 190s. We might not let y'all know about that one. Just kind of depends, if it's a over the counter tag, man. I mean, I might have to go hunt that thing. You know what I mean? But we're gonna show you some good stuff.
We'll tell you the coordinates after we kill him.
Yes, we will.
Yeah.
Maybe depends on how many up and comers are on that trail camera too. Oh, there's his son right there. Let's hold off for a couple more years.
Anyways, guys, we got a fun couple weeks coming up, and then honestly, like once late July gets here, it's whitetail season.
Dude, I feel like it's gonna go fast, man.
Yeah, it is.
Like, I've got this little, 8-day trip right here lined up, and then when I get back, I've got like a week. We're going to be doing some podcasting and getting really, wound up for deer season and elk season and everything. And then I'm going on another little like 3-day trip with my family, my entire Jones side of the family, and we're going to go do some fishing down in the coast. You kind of hooked me up with some friend of a friend kind of thing.
Did you get the hook up there?
Yeah.
Good.
So we're gonna make that happen and do some bay fishing, and then when I get back from that, it is It's July, man.
Dude, it's
You know what I
trail
mean?
camera season.
It's trail camera
Velvet
season.
Fest.
Velvet Fest.
That's
dude.
right.
I've seen like one velvet buck this year. In the daylight, though.
I've seen a tiny one.
It was pretty decent.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's good.
But anyway, yeah. So anyway, I'm pretty excited. I think June's going to fly for me, which is good because June's just hot and so far away from deer season. Once you get to July, you're like, man, there's really just one full month, and then it's elk season. You know what I mean? It's like you just, even though it kind of is two, but you got to
It's
keep
all right.
reminding
Tell yourself
yourself.
one.
Yeah, it's that positive,
That's
that
right.
positive outlook. You know,
Even if it's a lie, you can just tell yourself a
Just-
positive
yeah,
lie.
just be, I'm going to lie to myself optimistically here. Anyway, guys, remember, this is your element.
Living it.
Hey guys, turkey season is in full swing right now, and if you are planning on getting after it, make sure to pick up some Meat Eater Phelps turkey calls to stuff into the old turkey vest or into your fanny pack right now. I carry a few different things. I like to use mouth calls, and I like to use pot calls. Mouth calls or diaphragms, I like them because it gives you hand-free calling, meaning when you're working a bird up close, you can have your gun on your knee, finger on the trigger, ready to roll, and still be making turkey sounds. I like pot calls because I just like pot calls. I enjoy calling with a pot call. Whatever direction you go, including a box call, which I don't personally use too much, but they're fun and great, and I started out with them. Yanni, on the other hand, one of my main turkey hunting buddies, he loves box calls. And what's funny is I'll now and then look to him and give him the look that means get out your box call and find us a turkey. So it's not that I don't like them. I just have Yanni use his. Then I don't have to carry it. Go to Phelps Game Calls. Get calls that are made in the USA and get calls that'll get them close. Find yours at phelpsgamecalls.com today.